Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you are tuning in right now, chances are your attention, like ours, has pivoted to, well, the monumental task of planning. Whether that's charting the next fiscal quarter, maybe preparing for a significant career pivot, or even just contemplating the personal evolution that, the new year demands.
Yeah.
We are once again talking about resolutions.
And this is a topic that is just so often plagued by platitudes.
Yeah.
By superficial advice.
Right.
Every year you see countless articles pop up offering these quick fixes or hacks for goal setting, but they inevitably lack the structural integrity you need for true long-term commitment.
And we are moving way past the superficial today. Our source material for this, it isn't a simple checklist. It's an intellectually rigorous guide. It's really designed for those pursuing advanced self-optimization.
Yeah.
We're focusing specifically on elevated goal architecture and linguistic mastery.
That's exactly right. Our listeners, highly ambitious. You might be aiming for C2 level fluency in a language, mastering some new complex skill set, or maybe overhauling your professional methodology. And for goals of that magnitude, the approach just can't rely on simple hope. We have to delve into the foundational psychology of commitment.
So let's define the mission of this deep dive then. We want to extract the concrete strategies and, I guess, the psychological nuances that separate a fleeting intention from an enduring accomplishment.
Yes.
We are building the architecture of success, brick by careful brick.
And when we talk about a resolution, we really need to understand what we're undertaking. It's a solemn pledge to oneself, a commitment that carries real moral and intellectual weight.
So it's more than just an idea.
Oh, absolutely. It's a deliberate decision to overhaul a specific critical facet of your existence.
And when you say overhaul, you mean a fundamental top-to-bottom renovation, right?
Yeah.
Not just dusting off a corner of the system.
Precisely. To overhaul something is to take it completely apart, examine every single component, and then rebuild it stronger and better. And this ambition, it's applied across a staggering breadth of human endeavor. I mean, we see this pursuit of self-optimization everywhere.
It's universal, isn't it? The goals might be hyper-specific, like maybe achieving fiscal responsibility by curbing impulsive spending to bolster your savings. Or maybe seeking domestic tranquility through, refined communication and better scheduling systems.
And what's most relevant to our deeply curious listener profile, many people focus intensely on intellectual cultivation. And language acquisition, the pursuit of true fluency and nuanced application, is often the centerpiece of that whole effort.
The ambition is noble. To achieve fluency, to reach C2 level comprehension, to truly master a new language in complex real-world scenarios, that takes incredible effort.
It does.
But the source material identifies the immediate failure point. Without a truly robust roadmap, that noble ambition remains merely aspirational.
A wish with no wheels.
A wish with no wheels. I like that. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do most people go wrong?
The statistics are brutally clear on this. The vast majority of resolutions fail, and often within the first month.
The first month, wow.
Yeah, and the core failure lies in this psychological and structural dichotomy that we just have to eliminate. Vague ambiguity versus concrete strategy.
So that cultural catchphrase, new year, new me, is actually kind of insidious, isn't it? It suggests this radical, immediate change as possible, but it gives you absolutely no direction.
It's designed to provide a burst of fleeting, short-term motivation, a little dopamine spike.
Right.
But statistically, it's a precursor to failure because it just bypasses the necessary planning phase.
I see.
And the two biggest pitfalls that the material identifies stem directly from this avoidance of structure.
And the first pitfall being that inherent lack of definition, that vague ambiguity you mentioned.
Exactly. We encounter goals that are far too nebulous, and we should use that word intentionally here. Nebulous, meaning vague, ill-defined, or hazy. It lacks clear form or limits.
So if you approach a goal that you can't visualize with, like forensic clarity, how can you possibly map the steps to achieve it?
You can't. It reminds me of that classic business school trope. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
But here it's more like if you can't even define it, you can't even start managing it.
Exactly. And the source suggests that many individuals choose these nebulous goals, maybe subconsciously, because it provides a layer of psychological protection.
So as long as the goal is hazy, the criteria for failure are also hazy.
Right. You can maintain this comforting illusion that you're still in the process of achieving the goal, even if months pass with no measurable action. Concrete goals, they strip away that psychological hiding place and they demand accountability.
So the nebulous goal is really a form of self-sabotage, an attempt to delay that inevitable moment of reckoning.
It is. And the second major pitfall is equally corrosive: overextension, or what we call the all-or-nothing mentality. And this one primarily afflicts the highly ambitious learner who's used to achieving success quickly.
Right. They decide that if they're going to do something, they have to do it perfectly, immediately, and exhaustively.
And so they attempt to radically transform their entire lifestyle overnight. They're fueled by this initial enthusiasm. So they draft a schedule that demands, say, 4 hours of language study daily, a rigorous new exercise regimen, and a complete dietary overhaul, all at the same time.
Wow.
This radical shift is, almost without fail, a guaranteed precursor to burnout.
And I imagine the sheer weight of trying to establish 5 radically different, high-intensity new habits all at once just makes the whole system inherently unstable.
It creates too much friction against existing inertia. I mean, years of established routine, the path of least resistance, that can't be overcome in a single week. And this all-or-nothing mentality is described as detrimental because when the individual inevitably misses one component, say, they fail to get up at 5 a.m. once, or they miss one massive 3-hour study session.
They catastrophize.
They catastrophize. They view the entire system as compromised, which leads to immediate, complete abandonment. The system is just fundamentally brittle.
That structural brittleness is fascinating. So the remedy starts with a simple, tangible act, one that moves the goal out of the emotional realm and into the physical.
Precisely. Writing these intentions down, transcribing them from the abstract to the physical, that is the foundational step. This act is a declaration of intent. It's not just a memo.
But why is the simple mechanism of transcription so paramount? You said it shifts it from the intangible to the tangible, but what happens cognitively?
Well, when a goal exists solely in your mind, it's fluid. It can be revised, postponed, rationalized away in an instant.
Right.
Transcription forces definition. You can't write down, get better at English, without realizing how completely insufficient that is. When you write it down, the goal exists externally, and that lends a sense of officialdom and accountability to the whole endeavor.
It's like filing a patent on your future self. It formalizes the intent and makes the goal objective, not subjective.
And there's more. When you transcribe a list of specific detailed goals and you revisit that list daily, you engage the reticular activating system, or RAS, in your brain.
The RAS.
Yeah. This system basically filters the world for relevance. So by repeatedly exposing your brain to the written goal, you are priming your awareness to seek out and prioritize opportunities, information, and resources related to achieving it. The written goal becomes a compass that guides your subconscious.
That makes perfect sense. So we're moving beyond these vague statements like, I want to improve my English, and into the realm of structured, definable action that can actually be put on paper. And that structure, of course, is the renowned SMART framework.
Yes, the SMART methodology isn't new, but its application to high-level advanced learning is often really poorly executed. We have to use this framework to impose quantifiable metrics onto that initial noble aspiration.
It turns ambition into an engineering blueprint.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's dedicate the necessary time to dissecting each component through the lens of a C2 level learner, starting with S specific. How specific do we really need to be?
Forensic specificity is required. For the advanced learner, this means detailing the type of skill you're targeting and the context in which it has to be demonstrated. So, for example, just saying, I will read 1 book a month is specific, but it's not specific enough for C2.
So we need to add constraints that actually increase the cognitive load and force mastery.
Absolutely. A C2 level goal might be something like, I intend to consume 1 piece of nonfiction, academic prose, published for a native audience per month, and then produce a 500-word critical summary on its core thesis.
Wow, okay.
That specificity dictates the material, the cadence, and the measurable outcome. It eliminates any possibility of cheating with easy material.
And that transition leads us directly into M measurable. This is where we introduce those non-negotiable metrics that eliminate all possibility of ambiguity. We need binary success criteria.
This is the component that fights that subconscious desire for haziness we talked about. For C2, simply tracking the hours you spend is not a sufficient metric. We need to measure performance and cognitive load under duress.
Okay, let's revisit the excellent examples that were provided in the source material for these measurable goals.
The first one highlights comprehension endurance. Consuming 1 audiobook per month written for native speakers without referencing a dictionary or translation tool.
The constraint is the key there, isn't it? It forces the learner to rely on contextual cues and their established knowledge.
Precisely. The moment you stop and reference a dictionary, the metric is failed for that session. The goal here isn't vocabulary accumulation, it's about building contextual understanding and enduring linguistic difficulty. The measure is binary. Did you complete the book under those constraints, yes or no?
And for productive skills, the source gives an equally demanding metric. What was it? Articulating thoughts on a complex, abstract, political, or philosophical topic for 5 continuous minutes without pausing, using fewer than 3 filler words.
That is a brutal but necessary measure. It forces the learner to rapidly access sophisticated vocabulary and complex syntactical structures under real-time pressure. It measures true lexical fluency and mental agility.
So you're not measuring time, you're measuring the seamlessness of the thought-to-speech process.
And that seamlessness is the definition of C2 fluency.
The beauty of Measurable is that it gives you immediate feedback. There's no negotiation about whether you achieved it or not.
Exactly. If you fail, you know precisely where the breakdown happened. Was it a lack of vocabulary, structural hesitation, maybe inadequate breath control? And that failure provides clear data for refining your next attempt.
Okay, moving on to A, achievable. This is the safety valve component that combats that detrimental all-or-nothing mentality. So how do we ensure ambitious goals stay grounded in reality?
Achievability requires a brutal assessment of your existing time, energy, and commitments. We're aiming for manageable, incremental progress, not some seismic transformation.
Right.
An achievable goal scales the commitment to your current reality, and it allows for the inevitability of bad days.
So if a learner currently dedicates 0 time to language study, setting a SMART goal that requires 2 hours of focused work every single day is, well, it's mathematically unachievable unless they're willing to instantly sacrifice another core commitment, which, rarely works long term.
You are right. Achievability starts small. The source suggests starting with a non-negotiable 10 minutes, 5 days a week, and then building up to an hour over, say, 3 months. This incremental scaling respects the power of inertia. It's about convincing your brain that this new habit is manageable, not some monstrous threat to your energy reserves.
I think this is where many advanced learners fail. They confuse achievable with easy.
That's a great point.
Achievable just means possible within the constraints of my life, not comfortable.
Exactly. You must still push the boundaries of your comfort zone, but not so violently that you quit. Now, are relevant. If a goal is specific, measurable, and achievable, why does it also need to be relevant?
Relevance is the prioritization filter. It ensures we're not merely busy, but we're actually productive. If the larger mission is passing a C2 exam focused on judicial or academic writing, then spending 3 hours a day watching reality television in the target language, while it's technically immersion, it's largely irrelevant to the core skill set needed for that exam.
The key question to ask for every sub-goal is, does this activity provide a vital stepping stone toward my macro ambition? And if the answer is no, it's ruthlessly discarded. Relevance forces you to allocate your finite resources, your time, your attention, your energy, only to activities that provide the highest return on investment toward mastery.
And finally, T, time-bound. Establishing a deadline, a cadence, or some temporal constraint is the ultimate accountability mechanism.
It is. Without a deadline, a goal simply drifts into the future. It becomes a perpetual project with no urgency. Time-bound creates necessary pressure. Whether it's the per-month cadence for the audiobook or a setting specific week to complete a complex grammar module, the constraint prevents the twin evils of procrastination and scope creep.
So if we synthesize this whole SMART framework, we see that it transforms the amorphous act of improving into a series of defined, measurable projects with built-in accountability.
And that transformation is fundamental. What's fascinating here is how this structured approach helps to mitigate, to make less severe or serious, the risk of failure. We've eliminated ambiguity at every step, which means if failure occurs, it's a data point, not a catastrophe, because the system is designed for quick course correction.
This really is the architecture of success.
It is.
Okay, so we have the blueprint, the SMART goal. But a map is useless without fuel and momentum. We need to transition now to the construction phase, the methodology of learning itself, and how to maintain the engine when that initial excitement fades.
Absolutely. We live in an age of abundant learning resources, digital apps, formal instruction, pure immersion, and the ambitious learner is often paralyzed by choice. We need to analyze the role and the limitations of each method.
Let's start with the digital applications, the Duolingos and the Ankis of the world. They've democratized access to language learning, but what is their specific utility? And more importantly, where do they fall short for the C2 pursuit?
Well, their utility is clear. They are excellent facilitators of vocabulary retention through spaced repetition.
Right.
They engage the low-friction mechanics of the phone, making these micro-engagements easy and efficient for foundational lexicon review.
So they train recognition. When you see the word, you can recall the definition.
That's the critical distinction. But they are profoundly insufficient in isolation, and this is the vital caveat from the sources. They train recognition, but they fail to cultivate what we call organic discourse.
Define organic discourse for us.
It's the natural, fluid conversation that requires rapid, spontaneous application of grammar, idiom, and complex sentence structures in real time. Apps struggle because they just can't replicate the pressure, the stress shifts, the intonation, or the cultural context inherent in spontaneous human interaction.
So if you focus only on apps, you might develop into a learner who has this encyclopedic vocabulary knowledge, but struggles immensely to retrieve and use that lexicon instantly in a high-pressure speaking scenario.
Exactly. They know the words, but they cannot deploy them.
Right.
And that leads us directly to the superior methodology identified in the sources.
Yeah.
The holistic approach.
Which combines the best of all worlds. We need that structural integrity of formal learning married to the fluidity of real-world exposure.
Yes. You marry the structural rigor of a textbook or a formal course, which provides the necessary grammatical scaffolding and conceptual explanation, with the fluid, natural exposure of sources like advanced native-level podcasts, films, or literature. The structural rigor ensures you know why the language works, and the organic exposure ensures you know how it's actually used.
You need both the skeleton and the muscle.
Precisely.
So once we've established that holistic framework, we have to identify the single most critical variable that determines long-term success, regardless of the method chosen.
This is the crux of the commitment psychology. The critical variable is consistency over intensity. And this is fundamentally rooted in neurology, not in willpower.
That sounds a little counterintuitive, especially to the ambitious learner who just wants to power through the material as quickly as possible. Why is a steady trickle superior to a sporadic flood?
Because learning requires the brain to form and, crucially, to strengthen durable neural pathways. We call this memory consolidation. And this process isn't instantaneous. It requires time and frequent reinforcement. The benefits of daily, micro-engagements with the language far, far outweigh the benefits of sporadic marathon study sessions.
So an 8-hour binge session on a Sunday afternoon, followed by 4 days of silence, is actually less effective than 8 one-hour sessions spread throughout the week.
Significantly less effective for long-term retention and accessibility. The brain treats that intense, sporadic session as a sort of temporary influx of data, crisis almost. And much of that information is rapidly shed or it's filed in a difficult-to-retrieve location.
Whereas the daily engagement signals perpetual importance.
Exactly. 10 minutes every single day signals to the brain that this information is perpetually important, it's non-negotiable, and it must be prioritized for long-term storage and quick retrieval. This isn't just incremental growth. This is the compound interest of learning.
I love that analogy. Just as compound interest yields exponential financial growth over decades, 10 minutes of focused attention daily yields exponential linguistic results over a calendar year. Because that foundation is consistently reinforced, you're building durable neural architecture.
And that durability is the key to fluency. Fluency is defined by the speed of retrieval. It's not just about knowing the word, it's about being able to retrieve and use it instantly without any cognitive friction. And consistency builds those pathways wide and frictionless.
Okay, we have the goal, which is smart. We have the method, which is holistic and consistent. But now we have to confront the psychological nemesis of every resolution, the inevitable slump. We call it the February slump, but it can happen anytime the novelty wears off.
The February slump, that stagnation point that hits typically between 3 and 6 weeks, is when the initial dopamine rush just evaporates. The goal is no longer new or exciting or novel. And this is when the truly arduous work begins. The hard, difficult, sustained effort required to move from proficiency to mastery.
And when the dopamine fades, the natural tendency is to revert to the path of least resistance, which is the established, comfortable old habit. So what psychological technique does the source material advocate to counteract this powerful inertia?
The essential countermeasure is something called habit stacking. This strategy is not about finding motivation. It's about engineering your environment to make failure harder than success.
Okay, walk us through the cognitive mechanism behind habit stacking. How does anchoring a new behavior to an old one actually reduce that psychological drag?
It's pure cognitive efficiency. The most difficult part of any habit is the act of starting the decision-making, the overcoming of inertia. Habit stacking involves anchoring a new desired behavior, action B, to an existing ingrained routine, action A.
Nice.
You are essentially hijacking neural pathways that are already running on autopilot.
So if action A, making my morning coffee, is non-negotiable, then action B, listening to my challenging C2 level podcast, is automatically triggered right after it. It eliminates the need for me to decide when or if I should start action B.
Exactly. You utilize the established routine as a cue. When the kettle boils, your brain automatically transitions to the next programmed action. It drastically reduces the cognitive friction required to start studying. The Force provides a powerful practical example of this optimization, focusing on existing non-negotiable time.
The daily commute.
The daily commute. If your commute is a non-negotiable part of your day, something you simply must do, you stack your difficult listening comprehension practice right on top of it. This is optimization in action.
So we're not trying to find an extra hour, which is often impossible.
Right.
We are optimizing existing time that was previously spent passively, maybe scrolling on our phones or listening to music. The commute becomes the automatic zero-friction trigger for your daily micro-engagement.
And this leads us to the critical philosophical realization that underpins all high-level success. Habit stacking relies almost exclusively on discipline, not motivation.
That's often confusing for people. I think we see discipline as punitive and motivation as inspirational. Are they really that different?
They are completely orthogonal concepts. Motivation is a fleeting emotion. It's the momentary burst of enthusiasm, the feeling you get after a powerful lecture or the excitement of a new beginning. It is inherently unreliable. It spikes and crashes based on your mood, your sleep quality, even the weather.
Right.
You cannot build a long-term system on something so volatile.
It's the sugar rush of self-improvement.
Precisely. In contrast, discipline is a robust character trait. It is the ability to adhere to maintain fidelity to a course of action even, and especially when that initial enthusiasm is totally waned. It's the commitment to the system, regardless of your emotional state.
So on the morning when the alarm goes off and it's raining and you're tired, motivation says skip it, but discipline says the plan dictates action.
Discipline is doing it because you pledged to, not because you want to. The truly successful individual understands that they cannot wait for motivation to strike. They rely on established, disciplined routines that eliminate the need for an emotional decision every single day. And this introduces the concluding philosophical point that the source material really emphasizes. Discipline is the bridge between aspiration and accomplishment. Aspiration lights the fire. Discipline provides the structural integrity for the long journey.
We have spent this time not just outlining a framework, but actually demonstrating it through the very lexicon we're employing. We've been speaking at the advanced C2 level throughout this, fulfilling the linguistic goal our source material encourages. So here's where we take a deliberate step back and analyze that linguistic mastery in practice.
And this step analyzing the sophisticated lexicon in situ is crucial for C2 learners. It moves vocabulary acquisition past flashcards and into integrated cognitive understanding. So let's formally analyze some of the powerful verbs and adjectives we've used today, starting with their etymology, which often helps with a more nuanced application.
Okay, let's begin with overhaul. We defined a resolution as a solemn pledge to overhaul a specific facet of one's existence.
Right. To overhaul means to take something apart completely for examination, repair, or improvement. A complete renovation or transformation of a system. The term actually originated in maritime contexts.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it referred to the process of running a rope through a block without a load, or later, taking an engine completely apart. The connotation is one of thoroughness. It demands a systemic transformation, not just a cosmetic modification. You might overhaul your financial system or your methodology for deep work.
It implies a deep diagnosis before you even start the implementation. Next, we use nebulous extensively when discussing the failure of vague goals.
Nebulous is a high-level adjective meaning vague, ill-defined, or hazy. It comes from the Latin word nebulosus, which means cloudy. Its most common usage is actually astronomical, referring to a nebula, a cloud of gas or dust in outer space that lacks a distinct shape.
That astronomical route is perfect. So if your goals are nebulous, they look like a cloud amorphous with no discernible boundaries.
And consequently, your results will be non-existent because the target just keeps shifting. It's important for the advanced learner to understand that nebulous carries a stronger connotation of structural formlessness than simply vague.
And finally, mitigate. We talked about how structured planning helps mitigate the risk of failure.
To mitigate means to make something less severe, less serious, or less painful. It suggests reducing intensity or impact, so it doesn't eliminate the threat, but it lessens the severity of the blow. The root is Latin, mitigar, meaning to soften. So we use realistic planning, the SMART framework, to mitigate the risk of failure by softening its potential impact and making recovery easier. Another sophisticated use would be the new safety protocols were implemented to mitigate the risk of regulatory noncompliance.
That detailed analysis really elevates the vocabulary from simple definitions to functional, contextual understanding. Okay, let's move to the crucial advanced linguistic practice technique identified in the source, the shadowing drill.
This is a non-negotiable practice for anyone aiming for true advanced fluency, and it often distinguishes C1 from C2 learners. The purpose of the drill is to master the musicality of the language, the prosody.
We often forget that language is sound, not just text. So what does the shadowing drill involve specifically?
It requires the learner to listen to a native speaker, ideally on a challenging, complex subject, and simultaneously mimic them. You're not just repeating after a pause. You are speaking concurrently, almost like a shadow. You mimic the intonation, the stress patterns, the rhythm, the cadence, precisely.
And the difficulty lies in maintaining that simultaneous output while you're actively processing the input. It trains muscle memory and cognitive agility.
Exactly. It links your deep lexical and grammatical knowledge to the speaking muscle memory of your mouth and your throat. It forces you to internalize the pauses, the rises and falls, the pace of natural speech. This is how you achieve that coveted, natural, native-like sound rather than speaking with the stilted, accented rhythm of your native tongue.
For the advanced learner, what kind of material should they shadow and how should they track their progress?
You should shadow material that is slightly above your comfort level. So for a C2 learner, this means complex political or economic analysis, maybe philosophical lectures. And you track progress not by how much time you spend, but by measuring the duration of uninterrupted shadowing before you stumble. If you can shadow 5 consecutive minutes of rapid, complex speech without hesitation, you are achieving true mastery.
Okay, let's review the sophisticated phrases we use today as examples for this drill. And we encourage you, the listener, to engage in the shadowing drill right now. Focus on the smooth, assertive cadence and where the primary stresses fall. The first proposition, which encapsulates the importance of continuous effort.
I will prioritize consistent progression over fleeting perfection. Note the balanced rhythm of the contrasting phrases there, with heavy stress on consistent and perfection.
That phrase should feel rhythmic and forceful. Okay, the second one, focusing on the immersive nature of the advanced goal.
I am committed to immersing myself in the nuances of the language daily. Listen for the fluid connection of committed to immersing myself and that subtle stress on nuances.
And finally, the powerful concluding philosophical statement we identified that sums up the entire deep dive.
Discipline is the bridge between aspiration and accomplishment. A strong, assertive rhythm is required here, emphasizing discipline and accomplishment. And this drill is not about perfection on the first try. It is about consistent practice that builds the neurological and physical pathways necessary for true spontaneous fluency.
So we have completed the architecture. We've covered the psychology of commitment, the structural integrity of goal setting, and the specific application required for ambitious endeavors like linguistic mastery.
And to synthesize the core learning, success in achieving linguistic mastery or any high-level objective requires a synergy between 3 powerful components. First, you need the strategic clarity provided by structured planning through the SMART framework, which eliminates all ambiguity.
Right. And second, the strategic scheduling and efficiency that you get from habit stacking, which minimizes that starting friction by utilizing existing routine and protecting you against the February slump.
And third, the psychological foundation that's achieved by relying on ingrained discipline over the temporary, volatile energy of motivation. These 3 components together create a self-sustaining system designed for long-term adherence.
And we return, finally, to the theme of accountability. Our sources emphasize that the most powerful tool for ensuring adherence isn't just transcribing your pledge privately, but externalizing it, establishing social accountability.
By making your intentions public, you create an external layer of healthy friction. It makes it significantly harder to simply retreat back into the comfortable status quo or to quietly abandon the commitment without facing some scrutiny.
So we invite you, the listener, to utilize this framework immediately. Don't let your noble ambition remain merely aspirational. Articulate your SMART goals for the upcoming year. Define them specifically, make them measurable, and establish that crucial layer of social accountability, maybe by sharing them with a trusted accountability partner.
And here is the final provocative thought for you to consider as you wrap up this deep dive. If linguistic mastery is the ultimate form of self-optimization, and we know that starting friction is the single greatest enemy of consistency, what existing non-negotiable routine, your morning coffee, your daily walk, your nightly review of your professional calendar, can you immediately anchor your first 10 minutes of daily practice to, and thus eliminate the starting friction entirely? Do not wait for motivation tomorrow. Utilize the existing stable architecture of your life today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you joined us for our last session, you'll know we were really operating as linguistic cartographers. We were meticulously drawing the architecture of your goals, really defining what success looked like on paper.
And while that architectural blueprint is, well, it's absolutely foundational, setting the goal is, in reality, the easiest part of the journey.
Right.
Today, we are making a sharp turn. We're shifting from the plan to the process. We're moving beyond just setting goals and into the execution and, the intricate nuance it takes to really succeed at that advanced level.
So our mission today is a really extensive deep dive into advanced application. We're looking at what happens when that theoretical plan, when it hits the brutal realities of psychological hurdle.
Exactly.
And more importantly, how you can refine your interpersonal dynamics through, C2 level linguistic finesse. This is about making your language powerful, polite, and persuasive.
The crux of the challenge lies right here. Crafting a perfect schedule, defining your vocabulary list, that's a comfortable cognitive exercise.
It feels productive.
It does. But the actual difficulty emerges in two primary arenas. First, the internal psychological struggles, those moments of doubt, of stagnation. And second, the external sophistication you need in high-stakes social and professional interactions.
Okay, so we are officially moving past textbook grammar.
Way past it.
We're talking about the operational side of language, the art of truly effective human communication at the most sophisticated level. We're targeting the functional difference between being perfectly understood and being genuinely influential.
Precisely. If you are operating at the C2 level, you have to do more than just convey meaning.
Right.
You have to simultaneously convey the appropriate tone, whether that's respect or professional distance, subtle hierarchy, or true collaboration. And it depends entirely on the context of the interaction.
So to tackle this, we're going to dissect two major components. First, the necessary shift in tone for advanced communication. We're talking specifically about linguistic hedging. Yep. And second, that inevitable psychological trap that so many people fall into, the intermediate plateau. And we'll couple that with the advanced grammatical structures that serve as the antidote. We're talking modals of deduction, reduction, and the elusive subjunctive mood.
The goal for you, the listener, is to have a roadmap, a way to sound not just correct, but demonstrably authoritative and naturally polished.
Okay.
Let's unpack this immediately by diving into that relational aspect of advanced language, which is really about the way we offer advice, disagreement, or counsel.
Shifting gears then, let's talk about the mechanics required to navigate professional communication. This brings us to what we're calling the art of advanced counsel.
In the earliest stages of learning, A1, A2 directness is a necessity. It's actually prized because it minimizes ambiguity.
Sure.
You learn simple declarative sentences. I need help. You must go there. Do this.
And the learner is, correctly celebrated for that. Being able to generate those concise sentences is a huge achievement. It's all about clarity at that stage.
However, as you approach that C2 threshold, that same directness, it starts to become a liability.
How so?
The problem is that lower level phrasing, that simple imperative, like you must wake up early or you need to fix this error. When you use that in a modern professional or sophisticated social context, it often lands as well as abrasive or overly imperative.
Abrasive is the perfect descriptor there. it implies a kind of harshness, doesn't it? A lack of concern for how the listener is feeling.
Exactly.
You might be delivering objectively accurate information or genuinely beneficial advice, but if the delivery, scrapes against the other person's professional autonomy or their social sensibilities, the message is just lost. It's ineffective.
The advanced communicator has to transition from being a simple director of action to becoming more of a collaborative consultant, someone offering well-considered possibilities. And that's a fundamental change in mindset, reflected entirely in your choice of words.
And this is exactly where we introduce the technique that marks this shift: linguistic hedging.
Yes. Hedging is the strategic use of linguistic devices, certain words, phrases, or grammatical structures, to sound less direct.
So less absolute.
Less absolute and therefore more polite, more respectful, and less confrontational. It introduces this necessary distance between your viewpoint and the action you're suggesting.
So it transforms an absolute decree into a nuanced suggestion. Yeah. But let's ask the critical question here, the one I think the advanced learner would be asking. Isn't there a real risk that if you hedge too much, you just sound, tentative?
Yeah.
Or indecisive,
Uh-huh.
especially in like a fast-paced negotiation or an urgent business environment?
That is an excellent point, and it's precisely why we differentiate between hedging and apologizing.
Okay.
True linguistic hedging is actually a show of confidence because it demonstrates control over the subtle register of the language. If you hedge poorly by saying something like, "I guess we should do this," yes, you sound tentative.
All right, that's weak.
But C2 hedging uses soft modals and sophisticated phrasing to maintain authority while granting the listener autonomy.
Okay, let's make that distinction really clear. Let's use a workload example. If you see a colleague struggling, the direct, B1 level way of saying it might be, you need to study the documentation immediately. It demands compliance.
Right. And the properly hedged C2 approach, it dramatically changes that relationship dynamic. It would be something like, it might be beneficial for you to consider reviewing the documentation.
Okay.
We've deployed two key softeners there. The modal might, which introduces possibility over certainty, and then framing the action as a benefit or a prudent consideration rather than a non-negotiable necessity.
That shift is so powerful. The B1 sentence implies, I know best and you failed. But the C2 sentence implies mutual respect. It invites the colleague to acknowledge the suggestion without feeling, dictated to. It's a real exercise in relational subtlety.
And this is where we need to dissect the mechanisms of that shift. We are moving from a statement of fact or a direct command to a framework of collaborative possibility. The advice is framed in terms of potential outcomes, not compulsory actions.
And the source material highlights specific phrases that are just instant markers of C2 sophistication and professionalism. I think we need to internalize these as replacements.
Absolutely. Think about replacing the blunt, "you should do X," with something like, "it might be prudent to consider."
The word prudent itself is so important there. It's not just cautious. It implies acting with measured foresight and thoughtfulness.
It does.
By using it, you're suggesting that the action isn't some frantic necessity, but a thoughtful, future-oriented decision.
Correct. You are elevating the entire conversation. Another essential construct is using open, collaborative questions that soften the proposal. Something like, "Have you thought about the possibility of..."
That's inherently non-confrontational.
It is. It allows the listener to say, "Yes, I have considered that," but without immediately seeming defensive or resistant to your idea.
Let's apply this to a more complex, maybe even a negative scenario, because that's where hedging is most vital. Imagine you're presenting a significant business risk to a superior.
Okay, so if you use B1 language, you might say, "The proposal will fail because the budget is too low."
Which is very absolute and potentially alarmist.
Right. The C2 approach, using hedging and soft modals, it softens that impact while still maintaining the gravity of the warning.
So what would that sound like?
You would transition to, "There is a potential risk that the current budget allocation may prove insufficient to successfully execute the proposal."
Wow. Okay.
Notice the heavy use of qualifiers. Potential risk may prove insufficient. You're alerting them without making this absolute pronouncement that invites an immediate denial or conflict.
So in this context, the modals could, might, and may aren't just grammatical options. They're strategic tools for managing difficult professional dynamics.
Exactly.
You're transforming a fixed, heavy certainty into a flexible potential risk, which allows the listener to process it and respond constructively.
And this shift in tone is, as we've established, it's just indispensable in any high-level environment. You have to guide, counsel, and suggest. You can't dictate if you want to maintain influence and respect among professional peers. It's the social lubricant of the advanced lexicon.
And now we have to pivot sharply. We're moving from the external challenge of linguistic finesse to the internal hurdle that stops the majority of learners from ever reaching C2.
Yes.
The intermediate plateau.
Every single long-term learner experiences this. They start with enthusiasm, they make these explosive gains, and then typically around the B2 level, stagnation hits.
Right.
We have to address the core problem here. Why does persistence, which worked so well at the beginning, suddenly feel so fruitless?
It's often mistaken for a failure of discipline, isn't it? But our sources show it's actually a predictable failure of expectation management, and it's rooted in a core psychological mechanism. We are talking about the phenomenon of diminishing returns.
Diminishing returns is, it's an economic concept, but it is profoundly descriptive of the learning journey.
Explain that.
Think of the steep ascent of the beginner phase. At A1, you learn 100 nouns, and suddenly you can talk about your entire house. You invest 5 hours, and the return feels like a dramatic 500% improvement.
The returns are immediate, they're measurable, and incredibly motivating.
Exactly. You are operating on the steep upward curve. You can perceive the progress. Every small effort yields a massive, observable victory. And that visual feedback loop, it just fuels your dedication.
But as the learner progresses, the curve flattens dramatically.
You are still investing those same 5 hours, but you aren't learning foundational vocabulary anymore. You are now learning the subtle differences in connotation between, say, admonish and reprimand, or mastering complex inversions.
So the gains are still happening.
The linguistic gains are absolutely still occurring, but they're incremental, they're subtle, and most critically, they are far less perceptible. They're not easily seen or noticed in your day-to-day conversation.
So your internal progress tracker gives you a 0, even though you are actively learning?
Yes.
And that disconnect, the effort remaining high while the visible results seem to disappear, that is the definition of the plateau and the primary driver of demotivation.
Exactly. The learner starts equating lack of noticeable progress with lack of actual progress, which leads to burnout and, very often abandonment of the goal. The mistake is assuming the relationship between effort and visible outcome has to remain linear. It doesn't.
And compounding this psychological trap is the gap between passive understanding and active production, the active-passive gap. This is where most C1 learners feel the most crippling self-doubt.
This gap is the main source of that crushing feeling of, I understand everything, but I just can't speak.
Let's be absolutely precise with this distinction for the listener.
Okay, passive recognition is robust at the B2C1 level. You can listen to this deep dive, understand our discussion on the subjunctive mood and the term arduous, and follow every complex turn of phrase. Your brain recognizes and processes the input almost instantly.
Right. But then the tables turn, and the language needs to be produced, active recall. And that fluidity, that speed, it just vanishes. It's replaced by halting speech, grammatical errors, and a reliance on simpler words.
This happens because comprehension is instantaneous. It relies on identifying stored patterns. Production, however, requires high levels of working memory management, rapid selection of the correct grammatical architecture, like a conditional structure, and quick retrieval of less used vocabulary.
It's a far more complex cognitive demand.
Far more. And the feeling of fluency inside your head contrasts so sharply with the clumsy output, and that convinces the learner that they're not progressing. But they are. They are, in fact, just experiencing the necessary friction that precedes automatic C2 level production.
So the key insight here is that the plateau isn't a failure, it's a natural bottleneck.
That's a great way to put it.
You've amassed the knowledge passively, and the hard work now is forcing that knowledge into your active memory for rapid deployment.
Sure.
Which leads us directly to the action plan.
No.
We need the antidote to the stagnation.
Indeed. And the solution is not more passive consumption. It's very specific. Deliberate practice tied tightly to accountability.
We preach deliberate practice, actively working on weak points all the time. But why is accountability the indispensable factor when the problem is so internal and psychological?
Because internal resistance is so easily defeated by rationalization. Accountability leverages what's known as social contract theory.
Okay, so how does committing to a groom create a stronger commitment than the one you made to yourself on January 1st?
The value of joining an external commitment structure, like a structured conversation group or an advanced seminar, it extends way beyond the immediate linguistic exercise. It establishes a powerful social cost of quitting.
So the potential embarrassment, the feeling of letting down peers who are relying on your presence or your input, that social pressure is objectively higher than the internal mental friction it takes to open your book or join the meeting when you just don't feel motivated.
Precisely. If you are accountable only to yourself, skipping a session is a private negotiation. It's easy to lose. When you're accountable to others, the external pressure ensures that the social cost, the feeling of failure in front of a peer group, is dramatically higher than the effort required to participate.
So that external pressure forces the crucial persistence needed to push through those diminishing returns.
It's the key.
That is the foundation. Now, once that structure is in place, the deliberate practice has to become smarter. It has to target those specific C2 nuances, which brings us back to a powerful, if often underestimated technique: shadowing.
For the advanced learner, shadowing is no longer just about repeating words to practice pronunciation. It has to be elevated to C2 mastery by focusing specifically on the prosody.
The music of the language.
The music of the language, the stress timing, the rhythmic flow, and crucially, the linking sounds and sound reductions that characterize native rapid speech.
If you are still pausing after every word, you are B2. If you are linking and reducing words to create these seamless sentences, you are approaching C2. And this moves us directly into our technical breakdown of complex structures, because this is the material you should be shadowing.
We begin with one of the most sophisticated markers of formal, eloquent English, the inverted mixed conditional.
We have a target sentence here that embodies this formal expression and counterfactual regret. The sentence is, "Had I known the journey would be this arduous, I might have prepared differently."
Okay, first, let's identify the high-level vocabulary, which immediately signals a higher register. The word arduous.
Right. It's not just difficult. It means requiring strenuous effort. It's difficult and tiring. It conveys a real depth of experience.
It does. Now, the grammar itself. This sentence is a perfect example of inversion. Instead of the standard conditional phrasing, if I had known, we use the inversion, had I known.
Which is much more concise.
Yeah.
And powerful.
And it's reserved almost exclusively for formal writing or highly eloquent speech. It's an immediate signal that the speaker is confident in high-register English.
And this structure allows for incredible flexibility in expressing complex hypothetical scenarios across time, doesn't it? Let's look at some other useful conditional inversions you should be practicing.
Okay. For the type 1 conditional, expressing a real future possibility instead of if you require further assistance.
You would use.
Should you require further assistance, please contact the helpline. The inversion, should you, immediately elevates the formality. It's concise and professional. You see it constantly in formal written instructions.
And for the type 2 conditional, the hypothetical present or unreal situation instead of the clunky, if I were in your position.
We use the elegant inversion. Were I you, I would certainly reconsider that offer. Notice the use of were, regardless of the subject, which is also a nod to formal English. Mastering had I, should you, and were I moves you way beyond B2 structural capabilities.
But the real execution challenge, the one that makes the sentence sound truly native, lies in the reduction of sounds. Specifically, in the consequence clause of our target sentence, I might have prepared differently.
Yes. When spoken at a natural pace, we have to employ the economy of breath that native speakers use. The full word have is almost never pronounced. It reduces completely to a mere schwa vowel followed by the V sound.
So it becomes the EV sound. Might have?
Might have. The B2 speaker, still thinking about the spelling, might articulate, I might have prepared, which sounds hesitant or even slightly mechanical.
But the C2 master fluidly compresses it to might have prepared.
This compression is essential for rhythmic native speech, and you should be actively shadowing the reduction of other common structures as well. Would not have becomes wouldn't have, could have becomes could have becomes should have.
So you should be practicing sentences like,
practice substituting these in complex sentences. We should have arrived earlier, or they would succeeded had the funding come through. If you are still pronouncing the full have, your shadowing practice is incomplete. You have to drill pronunciation based on the acoustic sound, not the visual spelling.
That level of detail is true, deliberate practice. Okay, let's move to another key structural marker of C2 formality. This one is perhaps the trickiest for advanced learners because of how rare it is and its counterintuitive nature.
We're talking about the subjunctive mood.
Exactly.
The subjunctive mood is difficult because in colloquial English, it's often replaced by modals or other structures, which makes it sound a bit archaic when it is used.
But it's still necessary.
It is absolutely essential for formal, authoritative, and academic English. Its absence is a noticeable gap in a C2 speaker's repertoire.
The subjunctive expresses unreality, necessity, desire, demand, or hypothesis. We need to focus on its most common formal uses, expressing demands and urgency.
Let's revisit our target sentence for this. It is imperative that he remain consistent in his studies.
The natural instinct for every learner trained in standard present tense conjugation would be to say, it is imperative that he remains consistent. Why must we use he remain, omitting that final as?
That is the defining characteristic of the present subjunctive. When you use specific verbs, adjectives, or phrases that express necessity, demand, urgency, or recommendation, the verb that follows the phrase must revert to its base form.
Regardless of the subject.
Regardless of the subject. This is known as the mandative subjunctive.
Okay, let's look at the triggers that force this structure because they seem predictable. We need to look at both the adjectives and the verbs.
Exactly. The primary adjectives of necessity or urgency include imperative, essential, vital, crucial, mandatory, advisable, important, necessary. If you start a sentence with, it is the adjective that, you are highly likely to use the subjunctive.
Can you give us some examples using those adjectives?
Sure. It is essential that the evidence be reviewed again. Notice, not is reviewed. Or, it is vital that she attend the meeting, not she attends. The verb to be is particularly counterintuitive, often becoming be regardless of the subject. For instance, it is necessary that I be present.
Sounds almost wrong to the ear, but in formal communication, it is absolutely required. Now, what about the verbs that trigger this?
We have verbs of demand, suggestion, and recommendation. Words like demand, recommend, suggest, propose, insist, request, require, urge.
So if the CEO recommends a course of action, the verb that follows will be in the base form.
Precisely. The board recommended that the CEO resign immediately. The base form resign, not resigns. Another example. The committee insisted that the new rules apply to everyone, not applies.
This mastery of the base form, that subtle shift that defies standard conjugation rules, is such a powerful indicator of high-level formality. I can see it when you're writing a formal letter of complaint or a business proposal.
Absolutely. If you write, I suggest that the documents are audited, it's correct, but the formal tone is a little weak.
Right.
If you write, I suggest that the documents be audited, the formality and the authority are immediately elevated. The C2 speaker knows how to choose the right tone for the right context.
We should also touch on the one common usage that exists outside of commands and urgency. The expression of conditions or wishes using the fixed phrase as if or as though.
Yes, the hypothetical subjunctive. This is less common in modern speech, but it's still required in specific high-level writing. If you say, he speaks as if he were the boss, you are correctly expressing an unreal condition.
Whereas if you used, he speaks as if he is the boss.
You'd be implying that he might actually be the boss. It changes the meaning from hypothetical to a potential fact. The use of were, the past subjunctive, is what signals the unreality of the situation.
The master's difference is crystallized right here. It's these nuances, the subjunctive mood, the strategic linguistic hedging through soft modals, the concise inverted conditionals, and the mastery of native sound reduction. They collectively separate a functionally proficient B2 speaker from a true C2 master.
The B2 speaker communicates the message effectively and accurately. The C2 speaker communicates effectively, accurately, and elegantly. They manage social dynamics and express authority or collaboration precisely as the situation demands. It is truly the language of influence.
This has been an intensive tour covering the execution phase from, well, psychological endurance all the way to the mechanics of C2 eloquence.
We have established the necessity of linguistic hedging in high-level discourse. We've analyzed the reality of diminishing returns in the intermediate plateau and detailed the crucial role of accountability in sustaining effort.
And crucially, we've drilled down on specific structures, the arduous inverted mixed conditional and the subtle formal usage of the subjunctive mood.
Before we move to the final challenge, let's quickly review the core operational vocabulary we've activated today. These are the words you should really try to integrate into your active vocabulary this week. Abrasive, prudent, diminishing returns, perceptible, antidote, and arduous.
And now, for the call to action. We want to challenge you, the listener, to transform this knowledge from just passive consumption into active, structured application.
Your challenge is to craft what we are calling your 2026 roadmap. And this can't just be a simple wish list. It has to be a rigorously structural plan for execution that directly applies the concepts we've analyzed today.
Use the vocabulary we've highlighted. Don't just plan what you will study. Plan how you will counteract the inevitable psychological hurdles. Write down the answers to these specific, targeted questions.
Knowing that diminishing returns are guaranteed, how will you adjust your expectations? How will you plan for small, almost imperceptible victories rather than demanding massive, intoxicating gains? How will you learn to trust the compound effect of subtle progress?
Furthermore, how will you leverage social contract theory to maintain your commitment? Will you commit to a weekly C2 conversation group where the social cost of not participating outweighs the internal friction of practice?
You must name the group, the time, and the social penalty for quitting.
And finally, when you're practicing new structures like the subjunctive, how will you ensure your communication is not abrasive, but prudent? Can you write out 5 different ways to offer unsolicited advice using C2 hedging techniques?
Don't just think about this. The act of writing it down is the critical first step toward active application. The plan itself becomes your first C2 assignment.
And if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, the concept of rigorously managing the psychology of diminishing returns is the antidote not just for language learning, but for any long-term skill acquisition.
Understanding the plateau means redefining success. You consciously stop chasing the massive, steep victories of the beginner phase. Instead, you learn to trust the process, appreciating the subtle, near imperceptible gains of the master. This rigorous, nuanced approach to execution, trusting sustained smaller efforts over time, is the true secret to mastery in any field.
So what other major long-term goal in your life, whether it's fitness, financial stability, or career progression, could benefit immediately from this very specific, detailed, and nuanced approach to managing the long game? That is the question we leave you with today.
Stay disciplined, and we'll be back soon to continue guiding you through the complexities of becoming a true C2 master.
Thank you for joining us for this advanced session.
Okay, let's get into it. We spent the last few deep dives guiding you through building the perfect roadmap for a skill.
Right. We've covered execution, the initial tools for practice, all the structural stuff.
Exactly. But now we're hitting what feels like the true final frontier of performance and skill mastery, and that's resilience. This is the stage where, the vast majority of ambitious projects, whether they're intellectual, professional, even athletic, they don't just slow down.
No, they collapse. They just fall apart completely.
Right.
And that's because we're moving past the mechanics of it all. We're beyond the what to study or the how to practice. We are finally, I think, confronting the real adversary of any big goal.
Which is us.
It's the human element itself.
Yeah.
I mean, the source material we've been analyzing on the psychology of resilience and linguistic fortitude, it confronts this head on. The core truth is the inevitable decline of that initial enthusiasm.
That honeymoon period.
That's it. You can have the most perfect plan in the world, the best resources, be the smartest person in the room. But if you can't weather the storm of just boredom or exhaustion or those repeated setbacks,
then the plan is useless.
it's functionally useless. It's just a piece of paper.
And the sources today, they do more than just confirm that. They make this really profound and necessary distinction that I think we need to spend some serious time on. We aren't here to give you tips on just staying motivated. That's not the goal.
No, absolutely not. Motivation it's a bonus. It's nice when it shows up.
It's the cherry on top. But it's not a sustainable resource, is it? So our mission today is really to dissect the core difference between that fleeting feeling, that ephemeral emotion,
That spark.
and the systemic discipline, the quiet structural strength that actually gets you to the finish line.
That's the key. We want to give you the framework to understand how the real high-level performers,
Yeah.
the people who actually get to C2 fluency or build complex software or become elite athletes,
How do they do it?
how do they maintain that absolute consistency, even when they feel tired or stressed or just profoundly bored?
Yeah.
They've fundamentally shifted their relationship with effort. The whole focus moves away from, finding the passion and toward building a robust, self-sustaining architecture for that effort.
So the pursuit of mastery isn't some motivational seminar.
Not at all.
It is, as the sources suggest, a rigorous application of structural fortitude. So let's figure out how to build that structure. Okay, let's start with, I think, the biggest lie we tell ourselves when we start a big project.
The foundational myth.
Yes. We look at someone who's already successful, the advanced learner who just switches between languages like it's nothing, or the super disciplined CEO, the ultra marathon runner.
Right.
And we make this huge assumption about their internal experience. We assume it's just perpetual bubbling excitement about the work, that they wake up every day just brimming with motivation.
Can't wait to get started.
Exactly.
And that, as our source analysis just definitively confirms, is a total fallacy.
It's not just wrong, it's damaging.
It is, in fact, the most common misconception that just derails promising learners and professionals.
Yeah.
So let's get really precise about what motivation actually is.
Okay.
When we talk about that initial excitement, we are talking about something our sources call ephemeral.
Ephemeral.
It's an adjective that just means lasting for a very, very short time. Fleeting.
Yeah.
At its core, it's an emotion.
And it's tied to novelty, right? It's a chemical thing. When your brain sees something new, a new project, a new language course, a new piece of gym equipment, you get that rush of dopamine.
You do.
And it feels amazing. It feels like boundless energy. And we label that feeling motivation.
That's exactly it. That initial burst it's a biological signal. It's your brain saying, hey, pay attention. This is new and it could be important. But here's the thing about that chemical rush.
Yeah.
It has a very short half-life.
It's designed to fade.
It's an unsustainable state.
Yeah.
I mean, evolution designed that system to draw you toward new things, but not to sustain you through the tedious grinding repetition that is absolutely required for mastery.
Because the path to C2, or any really high-level skill, it's not glamorous.
It's 95% routine. It's repetition and just grinding through friction.
So relying on that initial feeling, that ephemeral emotion, that's a precarious strategy. And the sources use that exact word.
They do. Precarious, meaning unstable or dangerously likely to collapse. And the reason it's so dangerous is because emotions are, by their very nature, volatile.
They're all over the place.
Totally. They're
Right.
tied to how well you slept, what you ate, your stress levels, some crisis at work, even the weather. So the moment that novelty wears off or the material gets hard,
Or you're just tired.
or you're tired or stressed,
Right.
that emotional foundation just crumbles. And if your whole project is built on feeling good about the task, well, the moment you feel bad, the entire structure is liable to collapse.
You can't build a career or master a language on a feeling that might be gone by lunchtime.
You just can't.
So motivation is the spark. It's the starting pistol. It's great for getting you off the blocks.
A delightful chemical reaction.
But it is not the enduring fuel. And if we can't rely on the spark, then we have to rely on the structure.
And that structure is discipline, but, and this is a big but, we have to move past the common idea of what discipline is. It's not about punishment or just being restrictive.
Right. It's not about being a robot.
No. The source material urges us to reframe discipline completely, to see it through the lens of fortitude.
Fortitude. I like that word. It has a kind of dignity to it.
It does. As a noun, it's defined as courage in the face of pain or adversity. It's mental and emotional strength. It's a much deeper concept than just, following a set of rules. Fortitude is that inner steel you need to stand firm when the emotional winds are trying to blow you off course.
That distinction feels so critical. So discipline isn't about not feeling the friction. It's not about being a machine. It's about having the strength to acknowledge that friction, the boredom, the exhaustion, the stress, and to just push through it anyway.
Yes. It's the mature recognition that your immediate discomfort is basically irrelevant when compared to your long-term goals.
So this leads us to the fundamental psychological mechanism here. Discipline, or fortitude, is really the ability to decouple your actions from your feelings.
That is the absolute core of it. You do the thing because it's on the plan. Because you, yesterday, committed to it. You execute the plan not because you feel enthusiastic about it right now.
A feeling is irrelevant to the action.
High performers just understand this. They know that effort is very often required in the complete absence of any emotional investment.
So let's probe that decoupling a bit more. We can contrast the two scenarios. Think about studying when you're on that initial motivation wave.
Okay.
The material feels fresh, the hour just flies by, you feel curious. That's motivation doing all the heavy lifting for you, right? Your actions and your feelings are perfectly aligned.
It's easy. It's frictionless. Now, contrast that with the reality of sustained practice. You've had a 12-hour workday, you're exhausted, maybe you had an argument with a colleague.
And the material for tonight is dry.
really dry.
Let's say it's 2 hours of drilling complex verb conjugations you absolutely hate. That second scenario, that requires discipline. That requires fortitude. It demands what our sources call regimented adherence to the plan, irrespective of your current emotional state.
And that's where I think the difference between, say, willpower and fortitude really becomes clear. Willpower feels like a fight.
Every single day, a battle you have to win over and over again.
Yes, but fortitude feels more like a settled structural decision. You already pre-decided. It's Tuesday night, you're working for an hour, the debate is over, doesn't matter if you're tired.
Precisely. The high performer understands the feeling of resistance might be there, but the action is simply compliance with a long-term goal. And that small daily victory of choosing action over emotion, that's not just the cornerstone of mastery, it's the definitive trait. And I think it's important to add that sometimes the action has to come first to create the feeling.
Oh, absolutely. The action often precedes the feeling.
Yeah.
You might not feel motivated to start, but 5 minutes into the task, suddenly the motivation to continue just materializes because you started. Fortitude gets you started. Motivation sometimes just shows up late to the party.
So the challenge for you, the listener, is to stop asking, how do I make myself feel like doing this?
And start asking.
How do I make this inevitable, regardless of how I feel?
That is the right question.
Yeah.
And the moment we fail to make it inevitable, that's when we fall straight into the failure trap. And that is perhaps the most dangerous psychological hurdle of all.
Okay, so when we fail to do that, when we fail to decouple our actions from our feelings, we fall into this really destructive cycle that our sources call the failure trap.
It's so easy to do.
You miss a scheduled session, maybe you miss two, and then suddenly that inner critic arrives, and it is not gentle.
No, it's vicious. And that's when you start that cycle of immediate, intense, and completely counterproductive self-criticism.
The concept we have to avoid here is self-flagellation.
It's a metaphorical term, obviously, but it perfectly describes that mental state of just being excessively critical of yourself, of beating yourself up over a small lapse in the plan.
And the advanced learner has to recognize this, not as some kind of moral response, but as a highly destructive force that serves zero positive purpose.
Right, because it doesn't lead to course correction, does it?
No, it leads to quitting. So why is that specific critical inner voice so damaging?
Well, our source analysis points to this core cognitive distortion. Learners often view a lapse in their routine, let's say missing 3 days of study, not as a minor delay,
But as a catastrophe.
a catastrophic, all-encompassing failure. The internal narrative isn't, oh, I need to reschedule. The narrative is, I have ruined all my progress. Or even worse, I'm clearly not disciplined enough for this. I am a failure.
It's that all or nothing thinking. It's binary. It turns a logistical bump in the road into an existential crisis.
It really does.
Yeah.
And once that catastrophic thinking takes root, the almost inevitable consequence is
You quit.
they capitulate. That verb to cease resisting, to surrender, is the precise psychological outcome of all that unwarranted self-flagellation. If your internal narrative convinces your emotional brain that, you failed, you ruined everything, you're incapable, well,
The only logical next step is to give up, to protect yourself.
it's self-preservation. You surrender to protect yourself from any more perceived failure. So the goal is abandoned, maybe for good. It's a defense mechanism that has just gone completely haywire.
It's the moment the learner stops seeing the task as hard and starts seeing themselves as the problem.
Exactly. And this failure trap is so reliable, so predictable, that it actually has a name in the psychological literature, which is central to our source material. It's called the what the hell effect.
Let's really clarify this for the listener, because just recognizing this pattern is the first step to being able to defeat it.
Okay, so the what the hell effect. It's a cognitive trap where one small slip-up, a minor deviation from your plan, leads to the total abandonment of the goal.
And it's often followed by even more indulgence or quitting.
Right, because the person feels they've already failed. It kind of thrives on this idea of moral licensing.
I see this constantly with high achievers. They set this impossibly high standard, a perfect streak, and the moment they fall short, even by a little bit, they reason that since the perfect streak is broken,
The whole day is a write-off.
the rest of the day or the week, it's all a write-off. Might as well just give up.
Exactly. And the source material gives the perfect example for an advanced learner. I missed my lesson yesterday, so what the hell? I might as well skip today too. Maybe I'll just skip the whole week and start again Monday.
And what makes that so insidious is that the damage of the self-criticism and the quitting is so much bigger than the damage of the original slip-up.
Oh, massively. A single missed session over a 5-year path to mastery is completely irrelevant. It's a rounding error. But giving up entirely because of that one session, that is catastrophic.
The what the hell effect basically turns a minor scheduling issue into a justification for complete surrender.
It's a psychological torpedo.
So how do we fight back? How do we install the countermeasures? What is the C2 mindset shift that these high-level performers use to stay resilient?
The shift is, it's radical, but it's simple. You have to remove the moral judgment from the process.
Okay.
To the advanced learner, a deviation from the plan is just data.
Data, not a moral failing.
Not a moral failing, not a catastrophe. It is a neutral piece of information that just needs to be analyzed.
Data is clean, it's objective, it doesn't cause guilt, and it doesn't trigger that defensive surrender response.
Precisely. If you skipped 3 days, that's data. Maybe it tells you your daily commitment was a bit too ambitious for that particular week, or maybe you need better logistical buffers against pressure from work, or maybe the material was just too dense to tackle when you were tired.
So the question shifts from, why am I so weak?
To, what does this data tell me about my execution environment?
That reframing is so powerful, because if the failure is just a logistical error, then it has a clear, actionable solution.
And that solution is recalibration.
Recalibration.
Just means you carefully assess the situation again and you make changes. You reset the plan. This is the resilient response. Instead of guilt or self-flagellation, the advanced performer adopts this analytical, detached, solution-focused approach.
You observe the lapse, you recalibrate the schedule or the intensity, and you just continue immediately.
Immediately is the key word. The goal is to reduce the latency, the time between the lapse and your return to the path. You don't wait for motivation to come back.
You'd be waiting forever.
You apply fortitude and you recalibrate for the very next session. And this shift from seeing emotional failure to seeing a logistical error is how people maintain continuity not just for months, but for decades.
So if the lapse happens today, the C2 mindset doesn't wait until Monday to apologize and try again.
No.
It recalibrates for the next available hour.
Absolutely. The goal is not perfection. The goal is sustained continuity.
Yeah.
And the shorter the deviation, the easier it is to get back to full volume.
Okay, so we've established that the key to avoiding that spiral of quitting is to reframe failure as data and then apply the structural discipline.
Right. Recalibrate, don't capitulate.
But the core strategy for actually building the skill, especially these cumulative skills like language or complex professional knowledge, it really boils down to a single maxim we found over and over in those sources. And that is, consistency beats intensity.
It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But it's a fundamental truth.
It is. But why is it a biological imperative and not just, a nice motivational slogan? Why does this actually work?
We have to look past the subjective feeling of learning and get down to the underlying mechanics in the brain. It holds true because acquisition is a fundamentally biological process.
We're not just downloading facts.
No, we are changing the physical structure of our brains. Language learning, skill acquisition. It's a cumulative biological process. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to accommodate this new information. And that rewiring process is heavily, heavily biased toward frequency.
So we're talking about neuroplasticity.
Exactly. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and reorganize by forming new neural connections.
And how do the mechanics of that process specifically favor consistency over these big, intense bursts?
Well, it's rooted in a couple of primary mechanisms, mainly synaptic strengthening and myelination.
Okay, break that down for us.
Every single time you encounter a piece of material, you strengthen the synaptic connections associated with that knowledge. It's like walking the same path in a forest over and over.
It gets clearer, more defined.
Exactly. If you encounter that material frequently, say for 30 minutes every single day, those connections become incredibly robust. This consistent spaced repetition signals to the brain that this circuit is vital. It's important. It requires long-term investment.
And what about the opposite? The high-intensity cramming session, that sporadic 10-hour Sunday session where you try to make up for the whole week.
How does the brain interpret that?
Yeah.
The brain reads that as a stress event, a shock. And while you might get some good short-term recall from it, it's good for a test tomorrow.
Right.
The structures you create are volatile. They're fragile. Without immediate and frequent reinforcement, the brain initiates a process called synaptic pruning. It basically discards connections it thinks are inefficient or unused. It cleans house.
So the 10-hour session is just a flash in the pan for the brain.
It is. And then there's myelination. Myelin is the fatty sheet that wraps around the axons of your neurons. Think of it like insulation on an electrical wire.
It makes the signal faster and more efficient?
Yeah. Dramatically faster. It's what makes a skill feel automatic. And myelination is built through sustained routine use, not through sporadic shocks. So consistency builds the physical high-speed highway for this skill. Intensity just digs a fleeting ditch in the mud.
That's a great contrast. A single high-intensity blow might feel productive, but it's the frequent, gentle passes over the same ground, day after day, that cuts that deep, indelible groove we need for true mastery.
That's it. The brain prioritizes frequency because, evolutionarily, frequency equals importance for survival. If you interact with something for 30 minutes every day, your brain says, okay, this is vital. This needs to be cemented into our long-term structures.
But the 10-hour session once a month is just an anomaly.
It's an anomaly.
Sure.
So consistency, not peak performance intensity, is the biological prerequisite for mastery.
Yeah.
It's all about achieving what you could call the minimum effective dose every single day.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk to the listener who has been striving for that consistent minimum effective dose, but maybe they pushed too hard, and now they're feeling that heavy drag of exhaustion, the classic signs of burnout. They're fatigued, they're frustrated, and they are terrified of breaking that chain of continuity, but they just don't have the mental capacity for their usual 1-hour session.
This is a point of maximum danger. This is where so many excellent learners quit because they see the choice as binary.
It's either maintain the high volume or quit entirely.
Exactly. But our sources provide the practical, strategic solution. The answer for the resilient performer is absolutely not to quit. Do not break the chain.
So if quitting is off the table and high intensity is unsustainable, what's the survival strategy?
The answer is so elegant in its simplicity. You reduce the intensity, but you maintain the habit.
Reduce the intensity, maintain the habit.
This is the crucial risk mitigation strategy. And the key principle here is paramount. Do not lower the standard of commitment. You lower the volume of work.
Okay, explain that distinction. The standard versus the volume.
The standard remains. I show up. That is non-negotiable. The volume, so the duration or the quantity of work you do, that can be scaled down. It can be scaled down to almost zero if necessary.
Okay, let's give some really specific, tangible examples.
Yeah.
How small can that commitment be and still serve the purpose of keeping that chain intact?
It needs to be absurdly small. So small that it is literally impossible to fail.
Okay.
If your normal routine is to read 10 pages of a dense technical book, you reduce that commitment to reading just one single paragraph.
Or even one sentence.
Or even one sentence, yes. If you normally listen to an hour-long deep dive in your target language, you reduce that to listening for 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes of a news clip. The goal is not progress in that moment. The goal is to perform the necessary action, however minimal, that reinforces the structural habit loop.
We really need to focus on the psychological victory there, because the actual learning you gain from reading one paragraph when you're exhausted
It's negligible.
it's practically zero. But the psychological and the structural benefit of maintaining the chain is immense. It stops the what the hell effect before it can even start. You're signaling to your brain and to yourself that the ritual is sacred.
That is the crucial insight. You preserve the habit loop, and by doing that, you preserve your self-perception as a learner. You preserve your identity.
Right.
The maintenance of the habit is a higher priority than the maintenance of the volume. We can always ramp the volume back up when our energy returns. But repairing a broken habit chain, that requires fighting against the powerful psychological inertia of having already quit.
So the directive is simple, it's absolute, and it's structural. Do not break the chain of continuity.
That's the rule.
The small commitment maintains the ritual, it keeps the material in your peripheral vision, and it prevents that surrender reflex from kicking in. You get to preserve the identity, even on your absolute worst day.
And that preservation of identity, which is where we're headed next, is reinforced not just by our actions, but by the very language we use to describe our struggles and our victories.
And that brings us right back to language. The language we use, which is what the source material calls linguistic fortitude. For the advanced learner, mastery isn't just about applying these concepts, it's about being able to talk about these complex psychological challenges with precision, with sophistication. The language we use to frame our setbacks literally shapes our ability to deal with them.
Precisely. We need to internalize this C2 lexicon, not as, a glossary to memorize for a test, but as a set of tools that let us discuss our own internal states with the clarity and detachment that you need for recalibration.
It's like When you can label a destructive behavior with a sophisticated term, you immediately distance yourself from it.
Yes, it stops being who I am and it starts being a thing I'm observing.
Okay, let's focus on the rhetorical power of these specific terms. When we talk about that initial enthusiasm being volatile, we use the word ephemeral. Why is that so much more effective than just saying short-lived?
Because ephemeral carries a specific weight, a specific connotation. It suggests something. Delicate, almost poetic, a transient beauty that is destined to fade.
So it's not a flaw, it's nature.
Exactly. By labeling motivation as ephemeral, we acknowledge its inherent nature. We expect it to vanish, so we stop feeling betrayed when it leaves, because that was its job all along.
And you contrast that with the structural strength of fortitude.
Right. Fortitude, courage in adversity. That word immediately elevates the effort. It's not just willpower anymore. It suggests a deep internal resilience that you've earned through trial.
And then when we identify that destructive internal habit, we call it self-flagellation. And that term is intentionally dramatic.
It is, because the act of beating yourself up over one missed session is dramatically damaging. Using a term like that helps you visualize the absurdity, even the violence, of that internal act. It lets you externalize that inner critic and say, no, that is self-flagellation, and I'm not going to permit it.
And that externalization is vital for creating that mental distance. And of course, the consequence of letting that criticism win is to capitulate.
To surrender. We need to see that capitulation is an active choice, triggered by that emotional story of failure we tell ourselves.
And then the positive word, the action-oriented word that defines the resilient response is recalibrate. It's an intellectual word. It's technical. It's precise. And that signals that the response to failure should also be intellectual, technical, and precise.
Yeah, using recalibrate instead of something like try harder or get back on track fundamentally shifts the focus. It moves it from moral effort to logistical optimization.
A machine that fails is recalibrated.
An expert performer who deviates from the plan is recalibrated. It reinforces the mindset that the lapse was just data, requiring a detached technical adjustment, not a wave of emotional self-criticism.
Okay, so beyond just the vocabulary, the sources also emphasize how high-level learners actually structure their internal self-talk, their affirmations, to maximize conviction.
Their rhetorical command.
Exactly. And this points specifically to the power of something called cleft sentences.
This is such a great example of how linguistic mastery directly reinforces psychological fortitude. Cleft sentences. They're not just some obscure grammatical thing. They are rhetorical devices. You use them specifically to add extreme emphasis to one particular part of a sentence.
And it creates a sense of inevitability, of deep conviction.
It does, and it's a hallmark of C2 level mastery in a language.
So let's break down the mechanics of this for anyone who might have studied them in a textbook but never really applied them to something like psychological mantras. It's usually the it is structure, right?
That's the most common form. It usually starts with it is or it was, and then you have the element you want to shine a rhetorical spotlight on, and then it's linked by the word that. So the general structure is it is X, that is Y.
And the effect is to just foreground the most important piece of information. It removes all ambiguity. Okay, let's demonstrate the power of that. If we state the core idea of this deep dive in a simple, direct sentence like, discipline is the key, not motivation, it's clear. It works.
It's clear. But now apply the C2 cleft sentence structure, and you can just feel the difference in rhetorical impact. It becomes, it is discipline that is the key, not motivation.
It just lands differently.
It does. By pulling discipline to the front and embedding the rest of the clause with that, we make this undeniable declarative assertion. It sounds like a settled truth, not an opinion. The linguistic structure itself mirrors the psychological shift we're talking about.
Right.
We are declaring the importance of structure over feeling.
And that structural choice, it signals authority and conviction, which is exactly what you need when that inner critic or the what the hell effect starts whispering in your ear.
And the main affirmation from the source material uses this structure just brilliantly. It says, it is not the deviation from the path that defines me, but my resolve to return to it.
That's powerful.
Notice the rhetorical movement. The focus is deliberately shifted away from the negative, the mistake, the deviation, and it's placed entirely and unequivocally on the positive attribute.
On the strength of character required to recover.
Resolve.
Exactly. So when an advanced learner uses this structure internally, they are encoding this critical psychological lesson with conviction and with high authority. It's an exercise in self-persuasion using grammar.
So linguistic fortitude is about choosing the words and the grammatical structures that empower us.
Instead of relying on language that is vague, or worse, emotionally loaded. We choose precision, detachment, and conviction. And this linguistic mastery is the foundation for the ultimate challenge, shifting your core identity.
Okay, so we've laid out the architecture of resilience: fortitude over motivation, recalibration over capitulation, consistency over intensity. Now we have to move to application.
Right, how do you actually do this?
The sources suggest treating these core truths as internalized affirmations, almost like a mental shadowing drill, where you practice the feeling of conviction and resolve until they become automatic. These affirmations are designed to be cognitive anchors. They're short, powerful phrases that you can use to interrupt that destructive emotional cycle. They basically encode all the complex lessons we've been talking about into statements that are immediately accessible the moment you feel that friction.
Let's analyze the first big one from the source material, focusing on the meaning behind that word resolve.
Okay, the affirmation is, "It is not the deviation from the path that defines me, but my resolve to return to it."
Resolve. It's not just desire, is it? It's not just wanting to get back on track.
No, it's much stronger than that. Resolve is a deep, settled, unshakable determination. And this phrase, it completely reframes the whole narrative of failure. It removes its power. It acknowledges that, look, lapses are inevitable. They're human.
But the act that truly defines the quality of the performer
Is the speed and the certainty of their return to the plan. It's their fortitude in action.
It makes the act of returning that moment of recalibration the heroic action, instead of seeing the lapse as some permanent mark of failure.
Yes, it shifts the definition of success from never failing to always recovering.
And the second, shorter mantra is designed for that daily battle against the siren song of motivation.
I choose discipline over fleeting motivation. It's a conscious, active decision. It's a choice that has to be repeated daily to reinforce that decoupling of action from emotion. You are actively choosing the systemic fuel discipline over the ephemeral spark motivation.
You make the choice before the feeling has a chance to argue.
You make it ahead of time.
So finally, this brings us to the most actionable challenge, and maybe the most difficult one for the long-term learner, and that's committing to an identity shift.
This is where it all comes together. This is where knowledge stops being a set of rules you follow and starts being a fundamental part of who you are. The difference between having a goal and living as the person who achieves that goal is. It's massive.
It's everything.
It really is. And this challenge is crucial because long-term success is often less about what you do, your performance, and far more about who you believe yourself to be, your identity.
So we have to analyze the difference between an aspiration and an identity. An aspiration is a wish. It's a hope for a future state.
An identity is a commitment. It's a description of your current self.
So the passive statement of aspiration would be, I want to become an advanced speaker of X.
Right. It implies a future state that's dependent on luck or time or the continued arrival of motivation. The commitment is conditional.
But the active, identity-driven statement is what?
It's, I am an advanced skill speaker performer in training.
In training.
It's a statement of current reality. It's a professional designation you grant yourself today. And when you adopt this identity, the daily disciplinary actions, they immediately stop feeling like chores.
They just become congruent with who you are.
Exactly.
And that creates a powerful cognitive dissonance if you deviate, doesn't it? If I am a disciplined performer, then skipping a crucial session creates a conflict between my actions and my self-perception.
And that dissonance is a far stronger, more reliable, and more enduring internal driver than any fleeting enthusiasm will ever be. You are essentially forced to act in accordance with your new self-image.
An advanced learner doesn't skip sessions when they're bored.
They recalibrate, and they complete one page. The actions reinforce the identity, and the identity dictates the actions. It's a virtuous, self-reinforcing loop of fortitude.
Okay, so to make this identity shift real and not just a nice idea, we have to anchor it with systemic discipline.
We do.
And the final crucial step of this challenge is habit stacking. You, the listener, are challenged to commit to one specific habit that you will stack onto an existing daily routine to reinforce this new identity.
This is the direct connection between the daily action discipline and the long-term identity fortitude.
And habit stacking is so powerful because it leverages an existing routine, something you already do without thinking.
An anchor. It makes the new discipline inevitable rather than optional. The formula is simple. After I do current habit, I will do new, tiny habit.
And the current habit has to be something that is absolutely non-negotiable.
Waking up, brushing your teeth, making coffee, getting home from work.
Yeah.
Something that happens no matter what.
Okay, let's use a detailed example. Let's say a listener is trying to master complex coding, something that requires intense focus, and they often feel too drained after dinner to even start.
Okay, so we need to make this stacked habit absurdly small. Their anchor habit is, after I put my dinner plate in the sink, that's the trigger.
And the new habit can't be, I will code for 2 hours.
No, absolutely not. It has to be. I will open the relevant software file. That's it.
Not write code, just open the file.
Just open the file. That is the minimum viable commitment. Because once the file is open, that huge psychological hurdle of starting is already overcome.
Yeah.
And they might naturally proceed for 5 or 10 minutes.
And crucially, even if they just look at the screen for 30 seconds and close it,
they've still succeeded.
They've successfully reinforced 2 things. Their identity, I am a disciplined coder who opens the file daily, and the chain of continuity, I did not break the link.
And that small win is infinitely more valuable than achieving peak performance once a month. By linking the identity shift, I'm a disciplined performer, with the clear, small, stacked action, you build that systemic fortitude you need for mastery. And the ephemeral nature of motivation becomes functionally irrelevant to your long-term progress.
You've built a psychological seawall against the tides of emotion.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So what does this all boil down to for you?
I think we started by recognizing that the path to mastery is rarely, if ever, a straight line.
Not at all. You will encounter deviations, you will have drops in motivation, you will have moments of profound exhaustion, and that is simply data.
But the main insight we can draw from this deep dive is that progress, when it's fueled by systemic persistence, is pretty much inevitable. Success comes not from the impossible task of avoiding mistakes or avoiding boredom. It comes from mastering the art of logistical error correction, of recalibration, and consistently choosing discipline and that structural fortitude over your volatile emotions.
Remember that powerful affirmation. You are not defined by the deviation from the path. You are defined by your resolve to return to it. I think that principle of non-capitulation should be the core takeaway from this whole discussion.
Stay intellectual about your process, maintain your systemic discipline, and commit to the identity that serves your long-term goals.
And before we sign off, here's a final thought for you to carry with you, one that builds on everything we've talked about with consistency and fortitude. If we truly accept that deviation is just data, and that long-term success requires consistency even at a minimal volume, that mantra of lower the volume but never break the chain of continuity, what non-learning related area of your life could be radically improved just by adopting that specific tactical principle?
That's a great question. Think beyond your studies. Think about your fitness routine or your financial saving habits, or maybe maintaining important professional or personal relationships.
Yeah, we often let those relationships drift because we feel we don't have time for a big gesture, like a long dinner.
Exactly. So what's the small, daily, or weekly action you can take? A 1-minute phone call, writing a single line in a journal, transferring $5 to a savings account? What can you commit to that is so small it's impossible to fail?
Find that chain, make sure the action is congruent with the identity you want to adopt.
And never let it break.
We encourage you to apply these principles immediately.
Goodbye for now.